Good evening, all. Special guest interloper Alec Peters here with Chris. Pat is not going to be with Chris tonight, but fortunately, you don't have to suffer through me. Chris has got a brand spanking new PowerPoint presentation about, I don't know, all things Starship Tactical. How you doing tonight, Chris?
I'm doing pretty good. So,
and your cat's doing better without the gory details.
I'll leave off the details, other than to say that the anti-constipation medicine is working just fine, which is good.
Well, listen, all I stopped by tonight to just talk real briefly. We'll do it at the beginning before everything gears up about our Ares Studios latest project that we've just started, and we're going to be running in parallel as we shoot Axanar this fall, and it's Jewish Space Laser Corps. And you may have seen this. And but what we're going to do real briefly to get going is show you our wonderful little Jewish Space Laser video. This is a Kickstarter we're doing, and we're selling merchandise. And if we raise enough merchandise, not ours, can't show that. That's not ours. Can't show that. That's the other guys. And I don't want to get in trouble with them for promoting their product. Heaven forbid. But you can go to
space is big enough for all of us.
Space, yeah. The Jewish Space Laser program is big enough for everyone. You may have seen us launch the Jewish Space Laser. We did a live stream about it. We're going to be doing more here on the Axanar channel. So real quickly, because I know the audiences are often different, and I know Chris and Pat have their own great audience. We're going to show you the video. So let me add it to the stream, and we'll be back right after.
Hello, I am Danielle Ginsberg, commander of the Jewish Space Laser Corps, and currently we are located in the command center for the North American Jewish Space Laser.
And I'm Miriam Kaplan. I'm in charge of the JSL targeting technologies.
So, most likely you have never heard of us until recently, because it was a very closely guarded secret operation. Unfortunately, due to a recent misfire that targeted the forested regions of California, our top secret space laser was discovered by a crazy lady in the mountains of northern Georgia.
How she discovered a space program worth billions of dollars that had been kept secret for years by the same people who faked the American moon landing 50 years ago is absolutely beyond me.
It is a little unbelievable. Now, unfortunately, due to the attention that has brought, we now need to take extra care to not have an additional incident that could cause more undue attention. JSL Command has ordered us to improve our cloaking technology. So, a random member of QAnon doesn't get into our files and discover that Jerry Seinfeld has been a robot since 1992. As much as we would love to use money from the Jewish Mars program for this project, we don't have a Jewish Mars program yet. So that's not going to be an option. We're going to have to resort to more terrestrial, mundane methods of raising funds.
So we hope you will support us in attempting to improve our targeting technologies.
Yes, donors to the project can get 4 patches from the Jewish Space Laser program.
Oh, and a pin set, vinyl stickers, an official Jewish Space Laser challenge coin, and t-shirts.
Oh, we have t-shirts?
We have t-shirts.
You can get a t-shirt?
I'll get you a t-shirt.
Okay.
That way everyone can show their allegiance at their local drinking establishment.
Please consider supporting our efforts. And always remember to tell the truth. Because we are watching.
Okay, so that is our and this is the new video. That was the Kickstarter video, so it didn't give you the URL at the end. But listen, just go to Kickstarter, search Jewish Space Laser. We're the only one in the category with that name, and you see all the great perks that we have. We're at $7,600 right now. If we reach $10,000, the project is funded, and if we reach $25,000, we are going to take that extra money and make a pilot for a web series of Jewish Space Laser Corps, featuring Danielle Brin, who was Danielle Ginsburg in the video, and Crystal Hubbard, who was Miriam Kaplan, and others. We're already casting for some other roles, including Sammy Davis Jr. But I can't reveal all that. And we have a big, big reveal I can't tell you about right now because we got to get the deal finalized for who would be the head writer, but it'd be a famous Jewish person. And so we're really excited about that. So we will tell you guys soon. But in the meantime, that's it. I wanted to come in and just tell you guys about it. I am going to turn it over. But by the way, see that? Do you see it, Chris? See that up in the corner? You know what that is? I'll go the easy ones first. That's Cisco's computer. That's Starbucks helmet over there.
Oh, okay.
That is the nuclear bomb and detonator from Silent Running.
Oh, wow. I haven't seen that movie in so long.
Oh, I love that movie. It's my favorite movie. I love that movie so much. So anyway, that's it for now. I'm not going to bother Chris anymore. I'm going to turn.
That's the movie where Bruce Dern plays the crazy person, right?
Yeah.
Which narrows it down to like every movie that he was in.
He was originally he was always a heavy, like in the westerns he was in, when he guest started in, and even I think what was that movie with Karen Black he did back in the 70s? He had a star. He was always a bad guy, and then things changed for him.
The thing is, he looks intense when he's sleeping. He's just, he's just got.
He's 80 something now, and he looks intense, right? He still looks. Yeah, I'm going to see him at the end of August. He's signing autographs at a show in LA, and I'm gonna go see him. And hopefully I'm going to bring the costume from Silent Running and get some photos with him because in addition to that I got the Silent Running costume. So
cool.
Yeah, which is one of my prized possessions. So. I'm going to take that with me and show him and take some photos with him. I think that will be awesome. And he's in pretty good shape. He could probably still fit in it. He was a skinny guy back then. He used to run all the time. That's why. But listen, I'm going to let you go. We want to also condolences on the passing of your friend, who I'm sure you'll talk about.
Yeah,
and
we'll talk about him a little bit. We'll
keep that guy's family in our thoughts. So thank you so much. I'm out, everyone. Chris, good luck tonight.
All right. See you later.
Bye.
So as Alex said, I'm solo tonight. So Pat has his first day off in 3 weeks, something like that. And for some strange reason, he decided to spend it with his family. So I think it's because if he spends some time with his family, they let him continue to do this on Saturday nights. So he's not going to be here. So I'm going to be talking about in just a moment. I'm going to start a presentation on Naval Command and Control. Before that, though, Alec had alluded to Arias. I told you about Arias a couple of weeks ago. The original plan that Arias and I had sort of, basically had mostly scoped out the day before he had the stroke was that I was going to go down to Florida. I was going to be in Alabama for an event this past week, and then when the event finished on Friday, I was going to drive down to Arias's place. We had talked about either doing the show from his living room, or we had talked about, we were going to have a little bit more of a conversation about whether it made sense to try to go to Atlanta and do it from the bridge or do it from Alex's house. And we just never, didn't get the chance to do that. So if things had gone well, Arias would be sitting next to me right now, wherever we would have been, and he would have been on the show. But as I told you before, his sister said that the best way to remember him is to talk about him a lot. He was my game design partner, and we scoped out a novel together and played many, many games together, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm going to go down to help clean out his apartment this coming week. So just wanted to mention that he should be here, and I'm very aware of the fact that he should be here. In addition to that, you heard that Buddy was a little under the weather. Buddy's an old cat, and he's having old cat problems, but I was very happy the medicine is working, and so Buddy's doing great. And Buddy's going to go get to spend some time with the vet when I go down to Florida in a couple of days. So Lissa, if you could go ahead and share my presentation. Oh, that was fast. Okay, so yeah, go ahead and make it big. Go ahead and make it big. So this is a presentation that I've done at some science fiction conventions. I've been doing it off and on for about 10 years. Every now and then I put the hood up a little bit and tweak it a little bit. So you've seen probably references to pieces of this before, but it's one of those things that I've often said that, you know, I had this really cool job where I got to go off and spend time with the U.S. Navy. And I do a talk called What the U.S. Navy Taught Me About Starfleet that at some point I'll do on this show. And during my time at CNA, during my time going to sea and working with the Navy, et cetera, learned a lot of really cool things. And usually I came away saying, I just learned this really cool thing. The next thing I need to do is make sure that I tell people in the science fiction community about it and tell author friends of mine. And then I started doing talks at science fiction conventions specifically so I could pass this sort of stuff on. And command and control is something that you don't see a whole lot in Star Trek for most of Next Generation, for pretty much all of the original series, because there just aren't enough ships involved, right? For most of Next Gen, if there's a second Federation ship on your side, you've got a lot of stuff going on, and you might be dealing with 2 to 4 enemy ships, and there just isn't a whole lot of coordination. Later on, you start dealing with these big fleet actions in the movies. You start seeing it in Deep Space Nine. And what you see there, we talked about this in the Data Links episode, and we talked about it in the episode before that with Pat. What you start seeing in those episodes is this idea that that the communication is pretty seamless, right? At no point does anybody do anything that really looks like grabbing a radio headphone and talking into it or anything like that. You have like Picard in First Contact saying, you know, transmit this to everybody in the fleet. And so you've got some sort of data link. You've got an order that's going out on that data link in addition to some information. And that's very specific information, you know, target this particular location. That's way more specific than what you see currently. But that's all basically the data link portion of it. And I realized, you know, it was time to sort of pull back and talk not so much about the mechanics of it, but about the procedural element of it, the doctrine piece of it, right? So how the people interact to make it work in the U.S. Navy, and then at the end I'll talk a little bit about science fiction and how I think it can apply to science fiction. So you'll notice the subtitle is "How to Make an Army Guy's Head Hurt." That actually happened at a conference. The Army guy said something or another about command and control of Army units. I raised my hand and I said, "Yeah, that's not how the Navy does it." And he goes, "How does the Navy do it?" And I explained it to him, and I watched him go tilt, because it was such an alien concept to him, how the Navy has been doing command and control of a battle group or a carrier strike group, how they've been doing it for the last 35, 40 years, just caused him to go tilt. And so I'm going to tell you guys how it all works, and maybe you'll go tilt. Who knows? Okay. So this is sort of my standard disclaimer. You've seen this before. This is my views. It's not the views of anybody else. And nothing I say should prevent you from enjoying any work of science fiction. So please don't blame me. I'm just trying to educate you. I hope you enjoy it more because you understand some of the nuances that are behind it. You understand exactly how hard it is. One of the things about Star Trek in particular is that there's a lot of stuff in Star Trek they make look really easy that in the real world is really hard just because it's conceptually hard how you go about doing it. It's not just the technology. It's like it's the type of problem that you're trying to solve is just kind of hard. They make it all look easy. Sometimes they make it look easy just by ignoring it. But we're going to go into that. But please don't come away saying, oh, I don't like that anymore because Chris ruined it for me. That's definitely not my intent. This is basically what we're going to talk about. Going to brief little introduction. I'm going to talk about how it works in the real world. I'm going to talk a little bit about there's some implications for science fiction. If we got time, we'll talk about command and control spaces on ships. Okay, so what this talk isn't and is, and then I'll give you sort of my conclusion up front, and then a few questions that I'll sort of then go through and give you the answers to it. So I already talked about the Army guy. The thing that caused his head to hurt was the concept of command by negation, because the Navy, as a brief overview, I'm going to get into this a little bit more. What the Navy will do is the commander promulgates his intent, and then the commander shuts up. And he and his staff just listen. And if they like what they're hearing over the radio circuits, they don't say anything. And they delegate down to the next layer down to individual warfare commanders. They delegate them the responsibility and they make it happen. And the admiral and his staff just don't talk on the radio unless they absolutely have to. Unless they have to get on the radio to say, no, don't do that. This makes an Army guy's head hurt. Although the Army is moving more in that direction. This conversation took place circa 2003-ish, thereabouts. This guy had already been retired for probably 10 plus years at that point, maybe a little bit more. So I think by now, Army guys would probably go, well, yeah, with modern communications, we can make that work. We kind of do it that way. So I'm not up on Army doctrine fully, but there's elements that the Navy got to first that the other services are more and more interested in adopting over time, and one of them is this ability to do it that way. Is this ability to present the information and sort of let people make their own decisions. Now with Army guys, this is actually a really big deal, right? Because you've got Army units have to move in unison. You don't want them to separate, create a seam. You don't want them to sort of turn into each other, because that's how you can end up with a blue on blue. You don't want one unit to get out ahead of the other unit, etc. There's a level of coordination there that at least is implicit. And the way that the Army always used to do it in the past is you had somebody giving very specific orders to various units saying, go here and then hold until I tell you to go again. And if everything is going fast, everybody's moving real fast. But nowadays, you've got the ability that everybody can sort of like have their own common operational picture, and they see the blue forces on this common operational picture, and you don't have to actually get orders. You just know that you need to advance together. You need to not run into each other. You need to not open a seam between units that the enemy can exploit. And as a result of that, they can just sort of do it themselves in a way that didn't used to be able to be done. And so now I'm going to talk about how the Navy actually goes about doing this. So the bottom line up front is that the Navy has a command and control doctrine that it came about out of a particular historical context that basically came about in the 60s and 70s, and that they developed in order to enable them to fight warfare in that time period. And the end result of that is they now have, they came up with a doctrine that they continue to use. And it's also a doctrine that's readily convertible to science fiction. It makes sense in certain types of science fiction contexts. It is worth pointing out that, anytime you sort of compare the real world to what's going on in science fiction, it's highly assumptions dependent. The comparison is imperfect. In the real world, it's just about winning wars. In science fiction, you also have to tell an entertaining story. I'm going to talk about Jack Campbell's Lost Fleet series a little bit. At one point, I remember having a conversation with John about, like, you know, where's his staff? He needs to have a staff. And he said, look, dude, I've already got enough characters that I'm trying to balance in this. The last thing in the world I needed to do was add a bunch of other characters that I'd have to find things for them to do. So, you know, sometimes authors who know that they're writing something unrealistic go ahead and write the unrealistic thing because they're trying to tell a good story, right? And they have to tell a good story. So, yep, totally on board with that idea. So here's a few questions to sort of think in mind. Who does the commander of the air group work for on an aircraft carrier? You've got an aircraft carrier, you've got the ships that are escorting the aircraft carrier. Who does the commander of the air group work for? The air wing commander. Who handles the steaming formation for the battle group? Who decides what ship is positioned where? Who decides how you go about attacking the submarine? When are you going to attack the submarine? Things like that. So think about those questions. You should be able to answer those questions by the time I'm done with this presentation. So we're going to talk about real-world naval command and control right now. I'm going to give you an overview of how this system works, a little bit of the history behind it, and then I'll tell you about the system. It's worth pointing out the last time I went to sea is November 2004, 17 years ago. My information is stale. It's getting more stale. I know that there are things that have changed. There's positions in the doctrine that they've renamed. I am not up to speed on that. I don't have to be for this purpose because I'm comparing the system to science fiction to give you an idea of how it could work in science fiction. But, you know, don't take this as gospel truth as to what they're doing. I know it's like, it's now the 95% solution. It used to be the 99% solution. This ship, by the way, is the USS Higgins. At one point in time, it was commanded by now Captain Mark Delteet, who Lieutenant Commander Delteet was my cubicle mate for 3 years-ish. Maybe 2 years, back when I worked at the Defense Intelligence Agency. And so Mark went off to command this ship, and now he's in, I forget what he's doing now. He was a reactor officer for a long period of time, but now he's on a staff in San Diego. I wanted to put a DDG here because I love the DDGs. They're my favorite ships. And it just seemed fitting to find a picture of USS Higgins so that I could put up Mark's ship. So that's what I've done. So a few concepts. You know, I talk about command and control. Command is about the leadership sort of stuff. You know, it's about having the authority and the responsibility to make the decisions, being held accountable for those decisions. That's command. The control part is really about how you go about how you have the means to do it, right? You can have command, but if you don't have a radio to talk to your units, if you don't have any way of doing the communications piece of it, you don't have control. So control is about the feedback portion. It's about being able to pass on commands, etc. Command is about the authorities and responsibilities and the leadership stuff. When it comes to methods of control, you can do detailed control. You can tell people exactly what you want them to do, or you can basically say, this is the mission. This is the end state I'm trying to achieve. Go forth and do good work. Here are the constraints I'm going to put on you. Go forth and do good work. We generally try to use mission type orders in the United States military, and the Navy is no exception to that. We find that we get better results if you have highly trained people that you tell them this is the end state we're trying to do. Here are the assumptions you should make. Here are here's the resources you have available. Here are the constraints that you have to operate under. Figure out how to do it. Go forth and do good work. That generally works, and the better the military, the more likely they are to do it that way. Okay, some other important concepts. So I have a tendency to say battle group because when I first started working for the Navy, battle groups were a thing. These days, they're called strike groups. And I have strike group and also expeditionary strike group up there, not just carrier strike group. ESGs kind of went away. For a while there, you had the amphibs had escorts with them so that they had significant combat capability. In practice, though, they usually split off those guys from the amphibs and sort of deployed them separately once they got in theater. They eventually kind of decided this ESG thing wasn't really working because they never actually used it, so they got rid of it. But the difference between a battle group and a strike group is a strike group is smaller. A battle group back in the day was probably 12 ships. Over time, the ships got more capable and the Navy got smaller. So by the time I first started doing this in the late 1990s, early 2000s, it was more along the lines of 7 ships. A strike group is more like 4. And, you know, the Navy doesn't believe that a strike group has the same capabilities as a battle group. They understand that they don't. So the idea is that if they ever had to actually go and deal with a battle group size threat, they would augment the strike group with other assets. They wouldn't just, you know, throw in 4 ships and expect them to do the performance of 7. That having been said, ship performance has been going up, right? That's one of the responses that people give when they say, you know, like, hey, we don't have enough ships anymore, we need more ships. The response is, yeah, but the ships we do have are more capable. And those ships are more capable. They can do everything that a group of smaller ships could do. You know, you might have one ship that is the equivalent of 3 ships and can do everything those 3 ships could do, except be in 3 places at the same time. There's just no way around that particular portion. And that's one of the reasons why a quantity has a quality all of its own, and you need to pay attention to stuff like that. But the ships are more capable. You can talk about the combat information centers or combat direction centers. Combat information centers are basically on all ships except carriers. In carriers, it's called the Combat Direction Center. Combat Direction Center is a term that sort of works for all of them because it's not just about information. It's also about the command and control portion of it, right? It's about direction. That is where the tactical decisions are made. Those tactical decisions are promulgated from the people in the Combat Direction Center out to everybody else. So basically, CIC's direct combat as well. The only difference is what type of ship it's on. Now, the Tactical Flag Command Center is unique to aircraft carriers. They might have them on amphibs. I've done 1 tour of an amphib in my time period. I've never gone to sea on an amphib. I don't really understand amphibs in terms of how the command and control works when you start talking about an amphib and what the spaces are and stuff like that. But on a carrier, you have the Tactical Flag Command Center, which is where the admiral and his staff are located. That is a separate room from the Combat Direction Center. It does essentially the same kind of function. It has a bunch of displays. They're tracking everything. But basically, those guys are just monitoring the warfare commanders that are out in the fleet. Most of them are in the CDC, but some of them are not in the CDC. Some of them are on other ships. They monitor what's going on there, and they practice command by negation. So other ideas, operational and tactical control, have to deal with who is giving orders to the ship right now versus operational control is more big picture. The officer in tactical command is the admiral, who is usually, if you split ships off, you might have a local officer in tactical command, but it's whoever owns a particular set of ships and is the guy running that particular problem. You also have the Composite Warfare Commander. I'm going to talk to you about the Composite Warfare Commander system. I am describing the Composite Warfare Commander system to you. The Composite Warfare Commander is the admiral. Then there's also the idea of supported and supporting, which are pretty much what they sound like. If you are supported, it means that you have the ball and everybody else is blocking for you. If you are supporting, you don't have the ball. You are supporting somebody else. They are telling you what they need from you, and you are giving it to them. And so that's what supported and supporting means in this context. All right, a little history. So back in World War II, you had a very detailed kind of control. You had the people in the command spaces giving very detailed orders to everybody. You had very large forces. You had platform leaders, so what you sort of spread out some of that control by you'd have the destroyers would have a destroyer leader who would be responsible for making the destroyers do their thing, and the destroyers would kind of do their thing, right? Frequently, they'd go off and they'd do something separate, but the destroyer leaders basically had the ball on that. And you had limited ability to do searching, and you had limited ability for communications. Chris told you last week, Chris Carlson was talking about how this was a system that was easily swamped. It got swamped by kamikazes. If you had more than about 15 contacts on the radar and you're trying to track it all manually, etc., it was an easily swamped system back then. But it was the best that they could do at the time because they didn't have the technology to do things like data links, etc., which we now have. So in a lot of ways, that system sort of blended over into Korea and Vietnam. You still had detailed control. You still had very specific orders being given. The threat was a lot more limited, though. Vietnam did not pose the same sort of threat to the United States Navy that the Empire of Japan did. It was a very air-intensive threat. And so it was really more about the sustainment of forces and it was about air forces going and striking on land. It wasn't really about naval combat. It was about combat ashore. Then you later, by the 1960s and the late 1960s, the threat's really beginning to change. The Soviet Navy had been and also ran up until that point, but they decided they were going to be a blue water Navy. They decided they were going to come out and challenge us. And they had tactical nuclear weapons. They also had missiles. They were, the Soviets have always been on the forefront of rocket and missile development from the very beginning. And we really saw what that meant in the 1967 Arab-Israeli War. Because there were no Jewish space lasers to deal with this problem, you have a situation where the Israeli naval ship Elliot, which was a destroyer, was sunk by SSN-2A Styx missiles, so very, very early surface-to-surface missiles. And those Komars, they moved away from the dock, but they never really left their port. They were like out in the harbor when they fired those missiles. And they shot, some distance and sunk an Israeli destroyer. And it was the first surface-to-surface missile kill. And it really caused the world to sort of sit up and take notice. And it's funny, Chris was talking about kamikazes last week. A lot of the early anti-ship cruise missile sort of threat analysis, they're looking at where can I get something analogous, right? Where do I have data on this? And the answer is they realize that basically a kamikaze is a guided cruise missile, in effect, right? It's guided by a human being, but it's the same sort of problem. And so there was a lot of the early work on cruise missile defense went back and looked at the data from World War II and tactics, techniques, and procedures that worked in World War II in dealing with cruise missiles. So that's what the threat looked like in the 60s. So this is sort of the summary of the problem that you had. Things are just getting worse in terms of what the threat looked like. The threat was becoming multi-domain. It had started off multi-domain. It then went to basically being air-intensive, and then it went to being multi-domain. And by that, I mean you've got an air threat, you've got a surface threat that, they're firing missiles, so that's also kind of an air threat, but you've got other platforms you have to track. You've got a subsurface threat as the Russians, as their submarines got better and they built more submarines and they started building nuclear submarines. The missiles involved are faster. The airplanes are faster, everything's faster, so you've got a reduced reaction time, and you're dealing with a huge number of assets involved, and a huge number of incoming weapons. That leads to an increased reliance on communications in order to try to deal with that problem. And at the same time, you've got an increased vulnerability of comms at the same time, because you're having more and more things like jamming and stuff like that you have to worry about. And so jamming was a big deal, and there's this possibility that you're going to lose comms as part of the combat, right? And they're very worried about, they've got this detailed control system that's really sort of predicated on the ability of the commanders to spend a lot of time talking and a lot of time giving detailed orders, and that's gone away. And in addition to that, one of the things I don't say here, to be honest, there's a slide that apparently I forgot to copy over when I redid this that talks about this. One of the things that you run into here is that that the different warfare areas, the different domains operate at different speeds, right? So a long air problem, a long air attack might last 20 minutes. A short submarine attack might be 3 hours. And so as a result of that, you've got, you've got people that are dealing with problems that they're thinking in different timescales. And so having one commander that's having to shift back and forth on timescales is not helpful. And so that's part of the problem with that multi-domain threat, is that it's a multi-tiered threat. It's a multi-speed threat, and you've got to deal with it. So how do you deal with this? Well, the solution is something called the Composite Warfare Commander System, where you've got an officer in tactical command, the overall commander who is the Composite Warfare Commander, who delegates subordinate warfare domain to commanders. So he doesn't try to do it himself. The admiral doesn't try to do it himself. He's got 06s to do it for him, and they run the various pieces of the problem. So you have centralized planning, and that the admiral is still promulgating what he thinks is his, he's telling you what the constraints are, et cetera, et cetera. They still plan together, et cetera. So it's centralized planning, but the execution is passed out to the various warfare commanders who execute their pieces of it. You've got lots of pre-planned responses. If you go back and you remember, you've heard me complain about the lack of pre-planned responses in Babylon 5. It's the sort of thing you see in David Weber and you didn't see in Babylon 5, where Sheridan is calling out orders that it should have been execute Alpha 4, right? Execute Alpha 4 is a pre-planned response. That's how the real world does it. You don't invent stuff in combat. As a general rule, you've got a plan for that, and you say, use this plan. It's predicated on doing command by negation, where the admiral says, this is what I want you guys to accomplish, here are the constraints, and then he shuts up, and he just sits back and watches the show, and if he's happy, he doesn't say anything. And this is the thing that caused the Army guy's head to hurt, the entire idea that the admiral is not giving orders on a regular basis. But he's not. He tells them what he wants them to do, and if they're doing it, he shuts up. That leads to fewer comms, right? You're trying to push authority down to the lowest level possible. If the guys lower down sort of are doing their thing and they're making it work, and you lose comms, then they just keep on doing their thing. It's really oriented defensively in terms of what the warfare commanders are doing. They're protecting the battle group. They basically have responsibility for, authority for all the defensive actions they need to take, right? They don't, as far as the defense goes, they don't have to do a Mother May I. The officer in tactical command generally retains the Mother May I capability for the offensive stuff. If they want to go on the offensive, they have to go back to the admiral and say, "Hey, we think that right now the right answer is to launch a strike. So we want to launch a strike. You good with that, boss?" So that's retained by the officer in tactical command. So this is what I just said, right? So you got the warfare commanders that are 06s. They set and execute policy in their areas, and they coordinate with each other. And then you've got subordinate functional commanders and coordinators that help the warfare commanders execute. So basically, you've got a bunch of 06s that set the policy and are in overall command. And then underneath it, you've got functional commanders that own particular pieces of this. And you've got coordinators that basically just do a coordination function. They don't set policy. They just do the coordination function. And so like you might have the helo element coordinator, and his responsibility is to make sure that when somebody needs a helicopter, there's a helicopter available. So he's tracking maintenance schedules. He's telling people, hey, I know that your helicopter isn't due to go in for maintenance for another 100 hours, but bring them down now, because we want to avoid having everybody going in for maintenance at the same time. So go ahead and bring them offline now and do your maintenance in advance. And so they do all the scheduling stuff, including sort of, making sure that all the maintenance stuff gets done on a reasonable schedule. So a quick little sidebar about call signs. they all have their own call sign, and the first part of that call sign is a group designator that is associated with a strike group or an aircraft carrier. And the second is exactly what they do. So for instance, Foxtrot X-Ray is the ASW commander aboard the Carl Vinson strike group. X-Ray is says that it's ASW, Foxtrot is Carl Vinson. So you've got Foxtrot Bravo, who is the admiral. Alpha is always the admiral's boss. So basically the president of the United States is Foxtrot, he's Echo, he's all of those. And the National Command Authorities have those responsibilities. Bravo is always the admiral. Sierra is the Sea Combat Commander. So I say down the next down that sometimes they're dual-hatted. So like for instance, by doctrine, the Sea Combat Commander is both. I'm sorry, he's not the Sea Combat Commander. He's Zulu. Zulu is the Sea Combat Commander. My apologies. Sierra is the Surface Commander. X-Ray is the ASW Commander. By doctrine, those three call signs are the same guy. The Sea Combat Commander, by doctrine, also has to be the ASW Commander and is the Surface Commander. Sometimes they'll use one call sign, sometimes they'll use another. And then you also have things like they might also be the Screen Commander, right? So the screen is the ships that are directly protecting, they're directly in formation with the aircraft carrier. That call sign is November. So you might have, Foxtrot, this is Foxtrot Zulu, blah, 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 break. November, this is Foxtrot November, blah, 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 blah. So the first part is he's giving orders to everybody. The second part is he's specifically addressing the screen. Same guy on the radio. That guy isn't the captain who is Foxtrot Zulu, right? Other people speak with his voice. That might be an enlisted guy. It might be a more junior officer. But, they get on and they say Foxtrot November, and, they use their boss's call sign. In Battlestar Galactica, every now and then when Adama got on the radio, he said, this is Galactica Actual. And if the captain gets on the radio, he says, this is Zulu Actual. I've only once seen this happen. I saw the admiral get on the radio once in an exercise to argue with control about something. And so you ended up with, this is Constellation Battle Group Actual, I think is exactly how he phrased it. Different radio circuits have owners. So if you're going to use somebody's radio circuit and you're not normally on that circuit, you ask them permission to do it. So like there's the Sea Combat Commanders, SCC, CNR. Sea Combat Commander, contact and reporting. The Sea Combat Commander owns that circuit. He chooses who's allowed to speak on it. All the people that need to talk to the Sea Combat Commander can talk on it. But every now and then somebody else might come on a circuit. Usually they'll come on one of the ones that are less used, and they'll say, hey, I'd like to use your circuit. May I use your circuit? Yes, I relinquish the net to you. Blah, 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 blah. They go back and forth. And then at the very end, they say, I relinquish the net back to you guys. They pass it back. You only have one conversation on the net at a time. You don't have two different people. It's not a party line. You wait until those guys finish. You wait until they finish whatever they're talking about. So there's very specific procedures to make sure that everybody is clear on who is currently using the net and whether you're done or not. Now's a little time to go back and ask the question, you see any of this in Star Trek? Any of it? Anything that looks like any sort of radio discipline on any of this? I think it's because the computers are controlling all that stuff, at least by the time you get to Next Generation. I'm not convinced that when they open a hailing circuit that it's actually going directly out. I think it may be going through a computer very, very fast and then being broadcast, and the computer's keeping track of all that stuff. I don't know. Be interesting to sort of sit back and think about it a little bit. I've done a lot more thinking about how all this works in a few other universes, vice Star Trek. It's probably worth having a conversation about it at some point, right? Okay, I talked about warfare commanders. Here's the different types of warfare commanders. This is not a complete list. It's based upon my first experience with USS Carl Vinson around 2001. I went on board Carl Vinson that same general time period, and I wrote everything down. at the time, and so that's the notes that I went off of. So, like I said, the Sea Combat Commander is Zulu, but he's also the Surface Warfare Commander. He's also the Undersea Warfare Commander. The Strike Warfare Commander is Papa. The Air Warfare Commander is Whiskey. The Information Warfare Commander is Quebec. And Bravo is the Composite Warfare Commander himself. These guys all have deputies. So, like, if Zulu goes out, there's somebody else who takes over. When you get to the next level down, because you're basically handing it off to individual ships that don't have a full staff on board to sort of do that coordination function or do that command function, the next level down, the doctrine allows them to break them up. So for Zulu, so the backup Undersea Warfare Commander who has his own call sign, he's only the Undersea Warfare Commander. He doesn't do the surface stuff, and somebody else does the surface stuff. I once saw this get used. I was aboard USS Constellation. We had a main space fire. It was described as the worst fire that this chief had ever seen that didn't actually kill anybody. They had to turn all the air conditioning off. They were getting the fire under control. There was some concern that we might lose power. And so the admiral said, this is an excellent time to push this stuff down. And they activated all the subsidiary commanders, the backups, and they ran the problem. And basically the carrier and the staff on the carrier just monitored the situation to maintain their situational awareness and keep their plots updated. But they let the other guys run the problem. Good realistic training for those guys, and mitigated against the idea that if they lost power, they might actually go out of comms. So it was really cool to sit in. Actually, it wasn't really cool. It was really hot because they had turned off all the air conditioning. But it was very neat to sit in combat and just sort of watch how they handled this situation. It's the only time I've ever seen that happen. So I talked about functional commanders and coordinators. Here's some of the different guys over there, like Force Over the Horizon Track Coordinator. I know that job has changed names, but I don't know what it's changed to. You've got all these guys that like I talked about, November is the screen coordinator. I don't know the call signs for all of these guys. The submarine advisory team doesn't have a call sign. They're there to basically help the SEC, the submarine element coordinator. And when they're doing their thing, they basically speak with his voice. So they use his call sign when they're doing stuff. Now, you'll note that in none of these have I actually talked about the captain of the aircraft carrier. So where's the captain of the aircraft carrier? Okay, another sidebar. He works for the Composite Warfare Commander, so he reports directly to him. He's a peer, he's a fellow 06 with the guy who owns the airplanes and the guy who owns all the other ships. In fact, he's got a ship that there's like 2,000 guys on his ship that he does not own. He owns the catapults, the hangar, he owns all the spaces on the ship, but he doesn't own the airplanes. He doesn't own the air wing personnel. He doesn't own the Sea Combat Commander's personnel. Now, the air wing personnel is a huge number of people. It's like 2,000 people, 2,500 people. Sea Combat Commander, he's got, maybe 100-ish, something like that. I never did figure out what that exact number is. But none of those people report to the commander of the ship. They report to their own Navy captain. So the commander of the ship finds himself in a situation where he's the landlord. He's the building manager. He owns the ship. But his boss is one of his tenants, and his peers are his tenants. And that leads to some interesting power dynamics on the ship. All good Americans, all patriots, all doing a good job. But, this is a situation where sometimes people there might be a little grumbling, like, we kind of got screwed over. We got stuck in crappy spaces, etc. You just sort of grin and bear it. Oh, the commanding officer of the ship's company also provides a lot of information that's used by other guys. So like when you go in the Sea Combat Commander space, right? Combat is broken up on an aircraft carrier, the Combat Direction Center. You've got a part of it that's owned by the ship, and it's basically ship self-defense. That's about half of it. And then the other half is split between the surface warfare module and the subsurface warfare module. And for those modules, all the enlisted guys that are like below the level of chief, they're all ship's company, but the officers and the chiefs in both the Sierra module and the X-ray module, they all work for the Sea Combat Commander. Okay, so that's an interesting dynamic there. And there are instances where I know of instances where somebody from the ship's company was given an order that they thought was really seriously dangerous because they didn't think the guy giving them the order, who's with the Sea Combat Commander, understood the true implications of his order because it involved airplanes and he wasn't an airplane guy. And so he went to the officer, the ship's company officer who ran the Combat Direction Center and said, you know, Commander such and such, Lieutenant Commander Smith is trying to get our guys killed again. Can you please come in and tell him not to do that? And so the officer that I knew, he was a friend of mine, he told me about this later. He's somebody that I'd worked with previously. He had to come in and say, no, you're not going to do that. You are not going to have multiple aircraft in one space being controlled by different controllers. That is a recipe for a mid-air collision. So do what you need to do to sort that shit out, but you're not going to do it that way. It gets very interesting. I had a lot of fun watching all these dynamics take place at sea. So we talked about data links last week. So the one thing that I will say about this really is that there's a difference between track quality data, and that goes back to the kill chain discussion, and targeting quality data. Track quality data is, I need to know, I know approximately where they are, and I know well enough that I can put one of my sensors on it, right? So I am past a track, but then if I want to shoot it, I point my radar at it and I shoot using my radar. In the 21st century, we've added with cooperative engagement capability and Navy integrated fire control counter-air, which basically takes CEC, which is a thing that allows all the Aegis ships to sort of pass targeting quality data to each other, and it expands to air platforms like the E2. All that stuff, when you put all that stuff together, what you get is targeting quality data, which means I can fire a missile from my ship without ever turning my radar on. I've often said that a lot of the 21st century improvements to how data links work is the stuff that makes data links work the way that you would assume, a reasonable person would assume that they worked if you just got the 2-sentence description of what a data link is, and B, how they work in science fiction. In science fiction, they're passing all sorts of information. I can do targeting off of other people's sensors. All that stuff is sort of normal, right? You would expect that to be that ships in Star Trek to be able to do it. This is the equivalent of somebody pointing their cell phone at a situation, and I've got my, I'm looking at my cell phone and I'm firing my gun at that target based solely on what I'm seeing on my cell phone. Really hard to do, right? But we figured out how to do it, and high density, high bandwidth comms is a key to that, and a lot of processing power, and we're able to make that work, and it's getting only better. So the brief look at tactical symbology, all those symbols mean something. It really kind of started because originally the displays were kind of simple. Every now and then people say things like, well, wouldn't it be better if we had little submarines, et cetera, et cetera? No, actually, I like it the way it is, because those symbols are designed to be next to impossible to get wrong. You can be very tired and you can still look at those symbols and you can interpret them. It takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you get it, it's a shorthand that works a lot better than trying to, figure out which direction the airplane is pointing. It's better to just do it this way. So some implications for science fiction. First of all, I'm going to take another look at the bluff, look at a problem summary, and talk about a few things like that. So this is what I said before. Navy's developed this doctrine. It's based upon history. I think it's readily convertible to science fiction, but keep in mind the comparison is imperfect, and your specific science fictional assumptions will adjust the answer accordingly, right? So I'm going to make some gross generalizations on this next slide. we don't oftentimes see in science fiction what's going on behind the scenes. We don't see a model of space combat. Like I said about John Henry and his works, he leaves people out that are part of that chain, that they would have to be part of that chain in order to do things just based upon the workload, but he's leaving people out because he's telling a story. So this is all assumptions dependent. Take it with a big grain of salt. I'm trying to be an honest broker here and explaining how I see it, but remember, this isn't about pointing fingers and say, this guy got it wrong. It's about like, hey, isn't that kind of interesting how this works out? Isn't it interesting how the real world can inform this stuff and how it can increase your understanding of how it works? So here's a summary of the problem as I sort of see it in science fiction. Rapid growth of the potential threat. I mean, if you think about how many ships are involved in an Honor Harrington universe combat, yeah, that's a pretty rapid growth of the potential threat. On the flip side, generally, you've only got one domain that you're dealing with. You've got space. You don't have to worry about, I've got my sensors that I use for underwater stuff, and I've got stuff that floats on the surface, and those things have different capabilities, and oh my God, airplanes. You don't have that sort of breakdown. You don't have everything happens in multiple speed domains. You might be able to get that if you've got fighters. I'm doing the air quotes. You got fighters. You might have something like that, but I think I've argued on this channel previously that I don't think fighters make a whole lot of sense in the same sort of way. It's unclear about reaction time because that really is very assumptions dependent. If you got a tactically useful FTL drive and you can just drop in on top of somebody and shoot, that's different than if he came in out by the orbit of Pluto and we're going to watch him come in for 3 weeks. Your reaction time might be actually pretty slow. Although when the missiles actually start impacting at that point, your point defenses have to have fast reaction time. Do we think that there's going to be increased vulnerability of comms at the same time comms are more important? I think that's generally, yeah, that makes sense. Do we think that there's going to be effective span of control problems, that there's going to be issues along those lines? And I'd say, yeah, probably. I mean, think about it. Honor Harrington has hundreds of ships per side. How do you do span of control with that? So, implications for communications. Communications are likely to be a problem. In a lot of universes, you have jamming. And also you have light speed lag. If you don't have faster than light communications and the ships are farther apart, these are all highly assumptions dependent, you've now got a situation where it may take a long time for your comms to get to the ship that needs to react to those comms, right? I give an order, it takes 5 minutes to get there. Okay, jamming is really about decreasing the effective throughput of communication. Lightspeed lag sort of does the same thing, right? By the time the difference between by the time you get the information, it's kind of out of date, and maybe that's going to affect the kind of orders you give. Fits sort of in the same idea as I can only hear every third word, so the orders that you send out better be simple, because you know that if you try to give a detailed order, they're not going to be able to pick it all up, right? Same sort of idea, I think, I would argue. So span of control issues are likely to exist as well. This is from this is EVE Online. Look at all those dots. Look at all those little symbols there indicating the size of that battle. That would be a small skirmish in the Honorverse. But it's much bigger than anything that we're seeing for naval battles now. It really is bigger than anything that we've seen since about Jutland. Well, amphibs had a lot, like Normandy had a bunch of small craft going ashore, but in terms of like big battle wagons, Jutland is the nearest thing I can think of that's even remotely comparable to that. So let's take a look at some quick examples from science fiction. We're going to run just a few minutes long, Lissa, but only a few. So Battlestar Galactica, I really like this show. Ron Moore was very interested in trying to capture the feel of the U.S. Navy. So he's got things that look and feel like a real combat direction center. As I mentioned, you've got Adama they use call signs. Adama gets on and says Galactica Actual, so they know they're talking to the big boss. They have sensor platforms that go out and perform a command and control function to do coordination and stuff like that. I really, really like how Battlestar Galactica handles this as a general rule. Babylon 5, I love Babylon 5, but Babylon 5 just drives me nuts because you have this scene, they're in the war room, they're planning a battle, they're going to go into this battle, they come out of jump, and Sheridan starts saying things like big ships cover little ships do this, etc., etc. All stuff that A, should have been a pre-planned response, right? They should instinctively know how to do it, and he should have only looked at the screen and said, execute Alpha 4, right? He shouldn't have to be telling them, okay, the accelerator's the one on the right and the brake is the one on the left in the middle of a battle. So I really love Babylon 5, but they kind of dropped the ball in this regard. And it's a shame because they could have had some nifty bits here about how hard it is to coordinate forces. We have this problem all the time. The US Navy came up specifically with something called the XTAC manual, an unclassified manual that they could give to foreign navies so that we would all have a common language, we'd all have common procedures to operate under. And, I've seen this thing used, and it was really great when I was at CNA because it was unclass. I could hand it off to people, and it told them, it told a new analyst virtually everything they needed to know about call signs and all the rest of it. So from that standpoint, they could have had this very interesting discussion about how do you take a bunch of different ships that have different doctrines, different communication procedures, different assumptions about pre-planned responses, different ways of prioritizing message traffic, and how do you wield them into a common force? My guess is the Klingons and the Federation probably had to have some discussions like that too, in order to wield them into a common force. Star Wars. Yeah, don't get me started. There's a reason why I just don't use examples from Star Wars. I don't analyze Star Wars. I love the original trilogy. I was in 6th grade when the first movie came out. The golden age of science fiction is 12. I was 12 when it came out. But I don't try to analyze Star Wars. Star Trek. I think I've kind of distributed my thoughts on this throughout this. Most battles are actually quite small. When they do have larger battles, they do magic coordination and I'm not sure exactly how they're passing data back and forth, and it's not clear to me how the doctrine necessarily works, and the computers seem to be doing a lot of that. I'm not convinced that it should work. But it's damn fine entertaining television, and I, despite the fact I've been studying this for 15 years now, I've managed to not convince myself that I shouldn't like it. So I hope that example is good for you too. Honor Harrington is really a pretty good example of the right way to do all this. They have doctrine, they have a split, they think about these problems, about command, span of control problems. The computer handles a bunch of stuff, but as a general rule, David's got a pretty good handle on these things. There's a few places where it's like there's some questions there. Andy Presby and I still haven't figured out exactly what a CIC in this universe does, but I think they do a pretty good job. Jack Campbell, I've already mentioned. So Jack is a Naval Academy graduate, 1977, if I remember correctly. The Lost Fleet series is fantastic. And he's the guy who I sort of had the revelation about, that in this series, light speed lag works like jamming. They've got high performance ships that can end up moving very, very fast. The end result of that is they end up being very far apart. He's tracking light speed lag the entire time. It's not unusual to have a battle taking place 20 light seconds away or 20 light minutes away, and you're watching the battle 20 minutes time late. And, by the time you're actually giving responses to stuff, there's nothing you've got to say that will help the situation, especially since most of these battles are high-speed passes. So, because at these speeds, it's boom, and you're gone. And so they do the high-speed pass. They pre-program everything into the computers to do their fire missions as they do the high-speed pass. They do the pass, and then they count noses to see who got destroyed, and they watch the replay to see what actually happened. because all of it happens too fast for humans. So this is the sort of environment where delegating authority down to the lowest level possible makes a lot of sense. And that's how Jack does it. So normally, if we were all together, I'd ask for questions, but I will go back through the comments. If you got questions, put them in the comments, and I'll try to go through tomorrow and answer those questions and put it back up in the comments. I'll take the chat log and put it up like I always do. So you've seen this before. I'll do this real quick. This is a DDG-51 Combat Information Center. Oh, thank you. Thank you for dropping by, Santiago, and thank you for the super chat. So you've seen this before. I think you've seen it before. So if you look at, very faintly, you can see my cursor. This is the old layout. My friend Mark Delteet, who I mentioned, Uss Higgins had the new layout. I haven't seen the new layout. The way the old layout worked is these screens, these black things that I'm putting my cursor over, those are screens. The rectangles in front of them are lockers. They're like emergency equipment gear. Behind those screens, you've got a room that's a projection room. Those are other lockers for an emergency gear. And you've got projectors that are projecting on the back of those screens. You've got red surfaces are basically a computer monitor. The yellow surfaces, and this over here should be yellow because the yellow surfaces are the flat part. It's the desk part. Usually there's a keyboard in there that you can put a metal cover over it. So if you need to do writing, or you can take the metal cover off. Blues are chairs. So basically what you're seeing is you're seeing a monitor and a small desk that has a keyboard built into it and a chair. These rectangles off to the sides of the main monitors are a stack of displays, like a stack of they originally CRTs, but now they're flat panels, and they have various status information, like what the shot doctrine is, what their missile loadout is. There's usually one that's showing a picture of the flight deck, so the guys in CIC know whether there's whether the helicopters landed, et cetera, and whether there's guys in the flight deck, because they need to know that stuff because they're giving orders. All these other positions around the outside are warfare positions, except the one marked number 2. That's just general workspace. There's generally like an internet computer there. That's general workspace that they do stuff on. And so this is my model for what a Starship bridge should look like. Now, I talked about this is the old way they do it. The new way, basically, they push the monitors back, because now they, instead of having these projectors that need a big distance, like 6 feet, 8 feet to throw to the screens, they've got projectors that are mounted basically below the screen and vertically, and they're distorted. Keystoned is the proper word. They're keystoned in such a way that when it hits the screen, it's now a perfect rectangle. And so they don't need this big room back there anymore. So they got that space back. So what they did is they pushed those monitors back to the wall. And now they've got a space in front. And what they did is they took out the raised floor, because all this equipment is water cooled. So it's a raised computer type floor. And they've got water lines running underneath it to cool all this gear. They've gotten rid of that raised floor there. So now you've got a little pit area that's about a foot and a half deep. And they've taken all the officers from various locations around the room. They've left the enlisted guys who are manning some of those panels, but they've taken like the surface officer, the surface combat officer, the ASW evaluator. They've taken those guys, they've put them up in front of the TAO, so the TAO, the tactical action officer, and his sidekick can sort of overlook their screens and coordinate with them better. I call that the Battlestar Galactica bridge. So if you remember the old Battlestar Galactica, you had that big pit in front of Lorne Green that had people in it, and they were working the problem. It's the same sort of idea, just on a much smaller scale. I really, really, really wanted to get into the Aegis simulator at Dahlgren, Virginia to see this. I thought I was going to be able to do it. I never managed to make it happen. I really want to do a ship tour of one of the DDGs that has had this mod, so I can see the Battlestar Galactica bridge. That is my #1 desire for a ship tour right now. Okay, so this is those areas labeled. So the previous one had been marked up by Winchell Chung. This is what I did, and I sent to Winchell, and this is basically how that all breaks down. And so this is the Combat Information Center on Burke. You can see that you've got an officer to the left. He's the TAO. He's the guy in the right-hand chair. To his right, you've got an enlisted guy. The enlisted guy knows how to make the magic of the screen work, so he's really good at putting stuff up on the screens. There's another officer to this guy's left. There's a table in between them, sort of a center console table. There's another officer off to the left, and then there's another enlisted guy. To the right of this enlisted guy, you see those red buttons. That's his radio telephone. That's his radio. He's wearing a headset. He can actually be listening to one channel in each ear. And basically, it looks like there's sort of 2 columns of buttons. That's because he's got 2 channels, and he's controlling those 2 channels separately. All 4 of those guys can each listen to the same channel, or they can be listening to different channels. You've also got speakers throughout the room, so sometimes what you end up happening, I've done this myself, you pulled the headset off your head, now you're listening to the 1 in each ear, and you're listening to the ones around the room. The greatest number of channels I've ever monitored at one time was 5. I'll note, for the record, they're not all talking at the same time. You know, like the submarine guys have their own channel, but you only hear them when the submarine comes up, right? So some of the channels are very busy, others not so much, but you can sort of keep track of what's going on that way. You got the 2 big screens. You can see there's smaller screens off to the side. You can sort of imagine that there's a stack of a 2x4, 2x5 stack on either side of those main screens. And up above, you've got heading and course information, and a few other things, so that basically you can see what direction the ship is going, and et cetera, et cetera. And that's basically the end of it for tonight, as far as I've got. So I'd like to thank everybody for coming tonight. Like I said, if you got questions, go ahead and put them into chat real quick before we shut down, and I will try to answer them online tomorrow on this. Next week, I am going to be emptying out Arias's apartment, so I probably will not be on the show next week. It's going to be Pat by himself, most likely. If I get down there and it turns out that I actually do have the ability to be on the show, I might be on the show, but I'm operating under the assumption that I will not be. The following week, I will probably be back by then, and if that's the case, then I'll probably be on the following week, but Pat knows he's got the stick for the next 2 weeks. I will note that Pat doesn't have his simulator schedule for that far out, so there's always the possibility that Pat will be unavailable and I'll be unavailable, and we'll have to take a week off. I don't think that's going to happen, but it might. So just so that you guys know. So, Lissa, do you got anything to add?
Well, as Rupture is getting closer and closer to our Kickstarter launch date, keep an eye out on that. So I'm going to post the Rupture website real quick. That is the TTRPG I work for now.
That's good.
That launches in September. 2 Geek Girls is now on Thursdays, and I am also, doing my thing on Twitch again. So keep an eye out for that. And enjoy the kitty ears, because these just got in today.
I thought you had. Oh no, Crystal had.
Crystal has them. These are like little silicone things that you can attach to any set of headphones.
Ah, okay, that's kind of nifty.
So they're by Razer. I I assume they obviously intended them for a Razer headset, but I did not put them on a Razer headset. I put them on professional studio headphones.
That works. If it fits, run with it. So
Exactly. Hi, Rai. Hello, everyone. Hi. I'm not usually on here.
well, I'm glad that you came on. I was going to encourage you to come on because I know that a big chunk of the crowd also watches Two Geek Girls.
Yes, they do.
But my guess is not everybody does, and it's important. Alyssa is the producer behind the show, so she's got the magic powers that turn stuff on, and put the slides up and stuff like that. I know from my own experience as doing StreamYard production stuff that you can produce and be on the show at the same time. Alyssa does it, but it's easier if you've got a separate producer, especially if something goes wrong. Because if something goes wrong, basically the producer is no longer on the show until they fix the problem. And it's just kind of the way it is. And I've run a couple of conferences doing it. And if we're trying to actually have like question and answer sessions, we don't do that very much in this show because it's kind of hard to do it. We've got so many different tracks. We every now and then we'll do a question and answer show, but it's sort of hard to do it like on a routine basis in the sort of stuff we do on a weekly basis. But you really, if you are going to do question and answers, it really does get to the point where you got to have somebody who's just really doing that.
Yep.
And we were doing things like we would take the question out of Discord, which is what we were using for that, paste it into the private chat so the moderator would see it, and then I would go and put it in as a banner so that when the moderator started asking the question, I could immediately hit the banner and put it up. And none of that is hard, but try doing that, getting it right, and having a conversation at the same time.
Another thing you can do is, like put a Google Sheets up for people to, or Google Forms, like something like that. There are ways to do it. It's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah. And StreamYard is an absolutely fantastic tool. So I love just. I
have mixed views on StreamYard, but I also am not baby streamer. So
well, StreamYard's a really good 95% solution. If you want to do multiple cameras, it's not really the thing. If you want to do, there's all sorts of things you can do with OBS. Like if for some reason you need to connect your toaster to your computer and convince your computer that your toaster is a camera, OBS is the tool for you, from what I understand.
Well, have you seen my new OBS setup yet?
No.
Here, I'll pull it up. Let me share a screen real quick.
But it's fantastic that StreamYard lets you do things like throw up banners and all the rest of it.
So this is my OBS setup. So my starting screen, I've got a custom stinger, so it will transition. That's usually where my camera goes for just chatting. So I've got my chat on the side, so it shows up when I'm gaming. Now this is going to do infinite loop right now because I did a screen capture for it. But camera's there, chat's there. Like my latest donation goes up at the top, latest sub, cheers, follower. Got a be right back screen, and then an ending screen.
Yeah. So on my list of things to do, so when the Delta or Echo or Foxtrot variant makes us go back into lockdown, on my list of next lockdown tasks is to spend some serious time getting to understand OBS.
It does take a minute, not gonna lie. Sometimes there are moments where I'm like, why is it not doing game capture? So again, like the reason why there was an infinite loop was because it was not understanding what game capture was for some reason. So I just did a screen capture.
Yeah.
It works. You know, there's a couple different ways you can backwards your way into doing stuff in it too, though.
Yeah, so you've got a lot more capability with OBS than StreamYard, but there's also a lot more things that can go wrong.
Mm-hmm.
StreamYard's pretty bulletproof. I mean, basically what I would always tell people, back out of StreamYard, back out of the studio, come back in, back out of, close the tab, reopen it. If that doesn't solve it, or if closing Chrome and then reopening doesn't solve it, you've got a problem with your network or a problem with your computer. It's not a StreamYard problem, and you just need to reboot, or you need to reboot the router or do whatever. You start doing computer troubleshooting stuff at that point.
There's been a couple times where StreamYard just didn't want to play nice with my camera, and it was a StreamYard issue, not my issue.
Yeah, that surprises me. I've never had that problem, but then again, I'm using the built-in camera in my iMac.
Yeah, I was gonna say you're using a regular webcam. I've actually got a film camera.
Yeah, I'm at some point. So when I moved to Dayton, I decided I could start a new job and move 400 miles from where I lived, but I couldn't also buy a house, right? Doing all three was a little bit too much. So because I never lived in Dayton, didn't really know the area, so I didn't really know where's a good place in Dayton to buy a house. So I decided that I would move into an apartment that would be intentionally too cramped for me, because I wanted to wake up every morning and go, damn it, I still live here. I need to fix that. And then COVID happened. So I've got I spent a lot of money on computer screens, so I have a fair number of screens. But at some point I made a very conscious decision. I am done optimizing my workspace, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of effort, a whole lot of time, money, and effort optimizing a space I want to leave as soon as I can.
That's true. That's fair.
So at some point I'll probably that's the long-winded way of saying I don't have a camera yet, other than the camera in my iMac, which is actually pretty good. I'm using the built-in audio in the iMac, which is really pretty good. I've actually got headsets and stuff, and every time I've tried the headset, people go, no, go back to the built-in. The built-in's better.
Well, yeah. So, if I use the camera that's built into my laptop, let's I think so, that one.
Yeah, use the other one.
In a pinch, I can use it, but
I've also made a conscious decision that I'm not going to be real anal retentive about, the number of times I sit here like this or something like that.
Oh yeah, no, three-quarters of the time I'm sitting on crisscross applesauce in my chair. No matter what the stream, it's just I'm a pansexual woman, and that is just what we do. That is queer culture. Welcome to queer culture.
Works for me. For me.
But if you guys want to check out any of the many, many projects I work on, I have a link tree. You can go there and check out all the different things I do. I'm on 3 D&D streams, one of which is also a podcast. I work for Rupture RPG, and we will be at Gen Con in September. Obviously, I do the Ares Studios Axanar stuff. I also work with Archetype Cinematics. I'm my grandfather's caretaker. The magic of ADHD.
Yep. You've got a lot of stuff going on.
Yes, right. We are all in this together.
Yes.
Gen Con is in Indianapolis, and it is North America's largest tabletop convention. So if you guys are familiar with Critical Role at all, they go to Gen Con all the time. Companies like Wizards of the Coast are there. If you're anybody who's anybody, you want to go to Gen Con when it comes to the tabletop world, whether it's board games or role-playing games, doesn't matter. You want to go to Gen Con.
So do you know why it's called Gen Con?
No idea.
Because it started off in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin.
Oh.
The home of TSR back in the days. And
that
so,
makes sense. Did you? Okay. Have you heard anything about the TSR snafu that happened recently?
Snafu sort of implies that it was a mistake as opposed to somebody just being an asshole.
Oh no. It all gets better when you are on TikTok.
Oh yeah, I'm
because Gygax Jr. Was replying to a TikToker when all of this started. So I actually happen to be friends with Meg the Sorceress. She asked Gygax to clarify. And then Giant Lands and TSR just doubled down. It's been a whole thing. Like TSR is blacklisted from everything. So is Giant Lands.
So for those who haven't been following this, what's going on is through, I guess, some people just forgetting to file paperwork. Gary Gygax's son has access to the TSR brand. Yep. And is using it for some new company.
So and there's 2 TSRs because of this, actually. There's one owned by a man named Jason, and then there's this TSR that we're currently talking about.
I thought that Jason basically passed it off to the other guy.
No, he didn't pass it off to
that makes it even more
Ernie. Fun. That's why there's 2 TSRs technically now. And all of this went down. Luke Gygax, his brother, has come out and he's like, no. To all of this, he's like, we don't agree with Ernie here. You know, these are comments that are inappropriate, and we stand with the LGBT community here. Like, another person I actually happen to be friends with on TikTok, Luke Gygax.
Yeah, so it's been kind of interesting. I've only been following it as it filters into Facebook.
Yeah, it's that's been a few weeks. That has been a few weeks.
I haven't gone looking for more information on it because, you know, there's not enough hours in the day to accomplish everything I want to accomplish, but that's been interesting. But I started to say, you know, started in Lake Geneva, Wisconsin. I was having dinner with a friend of mine the other night, and he commented about how for, I think he was at the first Gen Con. I know he said that for the second and third Gen Con, he basically stayed at Gary Gygax's house.
Nice.
They were small enough events that, like, you know, everybody bring a sleeping bag. You can crash at my place.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yeah. So now it's this totally and completely huge event. I've never been to Gen Con. I always wanted to go when it was in Lake Geneva, because like one of the things that's up there is, I don't know if it's still there, but it was a secret agent themed bar and restaurant where you had you had to figure out how to get in through the secret door and stuff like that. And everybody I know that went there said it was just absolutely fantastic. It was a lot of fun.
See, I'm still trying to figure out what to expect at Gen Con. I don't know. I'm also baby game master, but for Rupture it's called narrator. And I am narrating 3 one-shots, and I'm assisting with our big event, which is going to be streamed. And that's on Saturday. And I'm also assisting like some of our tables on Sunday. So that's a thing. I've never really done much when it comes to narrating. So we'll see how baby DM goes.
You'll be fine.
I mean, I am that person that I've technically DM'd one event thing, but that was on an RPG server that I'm one of the mods for, and I literally have 12 pages of notes for an event that was supposed to last like 2 hours, and it's all typed out.
Nothing wrong with being prepared.
I over prepare when it comes to like narrating, game mastering.
with things like that, as long as doing something like that forces you to think it through, and then once you've thought it all through, you can blow off the stuff you need to blow off to make it happen at the time.
Yeah, guys, I play so many tabletops. Like literally before everything today, I was playing Curse of Strahd with friends. So my dice are still here, like right here. These are just the ones that are out.
Wow.
And I have a D100. That's a 45.
Yeah, and I bet it rolls forever.
Oh yeah, no, that's why I have a dice box.
Yeah, it's like rolling a golf ball.
Pretty much. I played a 3.5 campaign at one point, and at the very end of that, we had just switched DMs. The old DM was playing with us. He was a wild magic sorcerer. His wild magic wasn't doing anything that was fucking him over. However, when one of them failed their stealth roll, in fact, I think it was actually the wild magic sorcerer, we ended up getting our throats slit. But the DM gave us a chance to come back. Basically, we had a divine intervention moment. He said, roll a D100. If you roll anything above a 5, you're cool. Guess what the old DM rolled? He rolled a 5. We had like the biggest outburst of, oh my God, like of all the times, you basically have a wild magic moment. Now, when it matters,
Somebody
now you're
was
dead.
telling me about doing a traveler campaign, and the games master really didn't want to have psionics involved, but people were pestering him, so he said, all right, when you're doing character creation, roll a D100, and if you get a 1, I'll let you do it. And somebody got a 1. It's like, damn it, I hate this shit. I hate this. I don't want
A 1 in 100 chance is still a 1% chance. I was playing a character. Basically, I've homebrewed her to where she has kind of a Call of Cthulhu mechanic where she rolls for her sanity each day. And if it's below a certain number, she's not entirely sane for the day. And like depending on how high the number is, she's more sane versus less sane.
I've had coworkers like that. Yeah.
I rolled a 1.
Oh.
It's a D100 roll. I rolled a 1. She was literally as insane as she can go. So that is how we got the Pie Queen.
The Pie Queen.
The Pie Queen. So the night before, I had forgotten to put her back up in her room in the D&D server. So I was like, oh, she's still downstairs in the bar. And she had pie before she went to bed. So she wakes up, pie, crumbs all over her face because she just fell asleep on her plate.
Okay.
And she goes, the Pie Queen demands a sacrifice. And then she lays back down and is quiet for a bit because I was RPing 2 characters and having to like balance everything at the same time. And then a few minutes later, she gets up again, runs around, grabs a pie, runs out into the forest.
Okay.
That's how we got the Pie Queen.
Now I'm hungry for pie and I don't have any pie.
I'm sorry.
Closest I have is flavored applesauce, so I think I'm going to go have one of those.
Alrighty, folks. Well, it is 11:34. Chris wants flavored applesauce because he can't have pie, and I would like to stream at some point on my Twitch channel. So if you guys want to give me a follow on there, it's at Geek Girl Listen. Wait, there it is. At Geek Girl Listen. And again, if you want to follow all of my projects, there's that link tree. Love you guys. Live long and prosper. And we will see you next time.
See you all later, everybody.
Bye.